The average home price in Toronto right now is hovering around $840,000. Vancouver? Don't. Just don't. For that money, you can get roughly 600 square feet of someone else's anxiety, a parking spot that costs extra, and neighbors who will absolutely hear every argument you ever have. Meanwhile, in towns scattered across this enormous, brutal, beautiful country, towns that most Canadians couldn't find on a map without squinting, actual houses with actual yards, actual basements, actual garages are sitting on the market for under $80,000. Full houses, not haunted. Mostly. We're talking about real communities with Tim Hortons franchises and minor hockey leagues and those weird local Facebook groups where somebody's always posting about a suspicious van. This is the Canada your real estate agent doesn't want you to find. Hit the like button and subscribe. Now, let's get into it. Number 10, Campbellton, New Brunswick. There's a specific kind of quiet that settles over a maritime town in February. Not peaceful quiet, not library quiet, but the specific bone-deep quiet of a place that once had a lot going on and slowly came to terms with the fact that it doesn't anymore. Campbellton, New Brunswick, population somewhere around 6,700 depending on which year's census you believe, has that quiet dialed in to perfection. Situated on the south shore of the Restigouche River, staring across at Quebec like an ex-boyfriend who still lives in the same neighborhood, Campbellton is the kind of town where the skyline is genuinely dominated by a 17-meter fiberglass Atlantic salmon named Restigouche Sam. That's the tourism. That's it. That's the whole pitch. The median home price here floats around $65,000 to $75,000. You can find 3-bedroom bungalows with wraparound porches, river views, and root cellars that were built by people who genuinely knew how to build things, listed for under $60K. The bones on these houses are extraordinary. The insulation is a different conversation we'll have later when your heating bill arrives in January. Campbellton's economy took its hits. The forestry sector shed jobs, the retail core hollowed out the way retail cores do everywhere in Canada, and the CN rail shops that once employed hundreds have been silent for decades. The unemployment rate hovers a few points above the national average, which sits around 5–6%.
This is a place for someone who wants off the treadmill, not someone who wants room service. But if you thought New Brunswick was isolated, wait until we cross the bridge. Number 9, Bathurst, New Brunswick. Imagine you fall asleep watching a documentary about the 1970s industrial Midwest and wake up on the Chaleur Bay. That's Bathurst. Population around 11,000 in the city proper, which makes it practically a metropolis compared to most entries on this list. Bathurst is a bilingual post-industrial river city that has been quietly, stubbornly refusing to fully give up since the Noranda mine started winding down operations and the forestry sector began its long, slow divorce from the local economy. The housing market here is, in a word, absurd. Not absurd like a bidding war in Calgary. Absurd in the other direction. 3-bedroom century homes with original hardwood floors, covered front porches, and those high ceilings that people in new builds spend thousands trying to fake, starting at $55,000. A waterfront property on the Bay of Chaleur, one of the warmest saltwater bays north of the Carolinas, by the way, routinely hitting 20 degrees Celsius in summer, can be had for under $80,000 if you're patient and your real estate agent doesn't laugh at you. The Chaleur Bay situation deserves its own moment. This bay is gorgeous in a way that seems almost geographically unearned for something in northern New Brunswick. Clear water, sandy beaches, actual swimming in summer.
Number 8, Grand Falls-Windsor, Newfoundland. In 2009, the Abitibi-Bowater paper mill in Grand Falls-Windsor closed. Just closed. After 100 years. The mill had basically built the town. The town was called Grand Falls-Windsor because it was 2 towns that the mill industry fused together, like economic continental drift. When it shut, it took 800 direct jobs with it, which in a town of about 14,000 people is not a flesh wound, that's an amputation. What happened next is either inspiring or heartbreaking, depending on how much coffee you've had. The town didn't die, it reconfigured. It leaned into being a regional service hub for central Newfoundland, developed its tourism around Salmonid Interpretation Center, which is genuinely fascinating, not even being sarcastic, and has been slowly, stubbornly rebuilding its identity ever since. Houses here start around $70,000. You can find fully detached homes with attached garages, finished basements, and updated kitchens for under $80K. On the mainland, that price point gets you a parking space and a dream. In Grand Falls, Windsor, it gets you a whole life. Just in a place where that life comes with some homework about what you're going to do for work. The scenery around Grand Falls, Windsor is what Newfoundland does best. Dramatic, slightly threatening, impossibly beautiful. The Exploits River runs through town, salmon thick in season. The population has been declining, from about 14,000 to around 13,000 over the past decade, which explains the housing prices as much as the mill closure does. Fewer people wanting houses means cheaper houses. That equation is simple. Living inside that equation is more complicated. But here's what's interesting. The town has a young mayor who's pushing hard for remote worker immigration programs, and Newfoundland's internet infrastructure has improved dramatically. The province is actively trying to attract people. If you have a remote job and a high tolerance for isolation and weather, Grand Falls, Windsor will sell you a house for less than most people spend on a single semester of university. And speaking of towns that have been through some things, let's talk about a Nova Scotia town that has had a genuinely cinematic relationship with catastrophe.
Number 7. SPRINGHILL, Nova Scotia. SPRINGHILL has been through it. Not been through it like a bad winter or a factory closure. SPRINGHILL has been through it like a town in a folk ballad about fate. 3 mining disasters, 1891, 1956, and 1958, killed over 125 miners total. The 1958 bump, as it was called, a seismic underground collapse, trapped 174 men underground. Many were saved after spending days or weeks below ground in conditions that defy human imagination. Anne Murray grew up here. The world came to SPRINGHILL to witness both the worst things that can happen in a coal town and the extraordinary resilience of the people who live in one. The mine has been closed for decades. The coal seams that once made this place economically essential now make it geothermally interesting. The flooded mine shafts hold warm water that a local energy company has been pilot testing for geothermal heating. The mine that killed people may yet heat their grandchildren's homes. That's a SPRINGHILL story. That's specifically the kind of thing that happens in SPRINGHILL. Population, approximately 3,500 and declining slowly. Average home price, around $55,000 to $65,000. The housing stock is older. This is a Victorian coal town, which means high ceilings, ornate woodwork, and plumbing that has occasionally developed opinions of its own over the century. But the houses are solid, the lots are generous, and there is a dignity to the architecture that you won't find in any subdivision built in the last 30 years. What you will struggle to get in SPRINGHILL is a job that pays enough for a mortgage, which you don't need at these prices anyway. The economy is thin. The nearest significant urban center is Amherst, about 30 kilometers away. The winters are Nova Scotia winters, wet, gray, and philosophically challenging. The summers are genuinely beautiful in a pastoral, unphotographable way. But for under $80,000, you could own a piece of a town that has refused repeatedly with historical documentation to be finished. There are worse things to invest in. Now, let's go deeper into the interior. Much deeper, like disturbingly deeper. We're heading to Ontario's north, where a company built an entire town, and then the company had second thoughts. Number 6. KAPUSKASING, Ontario. KAPUSKASING was planned. That's the first and most important thing to understand about it. In 1917, the Ontario government decided to build a town, a real grid-organized, architecturally considered town in the middle of the boreal forest, 800 kilometers north of Toronto, to house workers for the Spruce Falls Power and Paper Company. They laid it out with parks and curved streets and a town center that, if you squint and ignore the spruce trees pressing in from every direction, looks almost European. Then the paper mill, the reason for all of it, scaled back in the 1990s.
sold to Tembec, and eventually reduced its workforce until the operation closed in 2012. The plan, as it were, had concluded. The town, however, had not received that particular memo. Population sits around 8,300. Average home price? Somewhere between $55,000 and $70,000. The planned community architecture means you get genuinely nice streetscapes, mature tree canopy, and houses that were built to a standard because a company needed its workers to be productive and content. The isolation is real. The nearest city of any significance is Timmins, about 200 kilometers southwest. The CN rail line runs through. Kapuskasing has a train station, which gives it a connection to the outside world that many towns at this latitude lack. The winter average temperature in January is around minus 20 degrees Celsius, which is the kind of number you read and think you understand, and then experience for the first time and understand completely differently. On the local Facebook community page, and I have spent more time than I should admit reading small-town Ontario Facebook pages for this video, Kapuskasing residents talk about the river, the fishing, the cross-country skiing, and the caribou that occasionally wander into town in a tone that suggests they've made a genuine peace with where they live. There's no irony in it. These are people who know exactly what they chose. The Kapuskasing River is beautiful. The community pool is heated year-round, there's a curling club, the Tim Hortons is, of course, there. In Kapuskasing, Tim Hortons isn't a chain, it's infrastructure. Under $80,000. Planned community. Boreal forest. In Ontario. It's real. But if planned isolation feels too on brand, Quebec has something a little more scenic, with its own particular flavor of abandonment chic.
Number 5. Témiscaming, Quebec. Témiscaming sits at the southern tip of Lake Témiscaming, right on the Ontario-Quebec border, and it looks, genuinely and without exaggeration, like someone took a Swiss alpine village and dropped it gently into the Canadian Shield. The town was designed in 1917, same wave of company town planning that built Kapuskasing, by a landscape architect from the Olmsted firm, the people responsible for Central Park. Population, around 2,400, which is where the travel magazine story starts to develop some plot complications. This is a small town, genuinely small, village-scale small, in a region that has been losing population for decades as the forestry economy contracted. The Domtar mill, which is still operational, is the economic anchor, and the town lives and breathes around its schedule in a way that reminds you how recently, historically speaking, the company town model was basically universal. Average home prices hover around $60,000 to $75,000. The houses here have character, real character, not the character that real estate listings use to mean the ceiling is low and the floors are uneven. Because the town was designed, the housing has coherence. The primary challenge with Témiscaming is the classic Quebec North problem. It helps enormously to speak French. Not in a hostile way. Quebecois small-town hospitality is legendary once you're inside it, but in a practical way. Services, social life, local employment, French is the operating language. This is not a criticism, it is information. The outdoor situation is, and I want to be precise here, extraordinary. Lake Témiscaming is one of the deepest lakes in Quebec, cold and clear and enormous. The Keepawa River system nearby is a canoe tripping destination of international reputation. Hunting, fishing, snowmobiling, skiing, the recreational calendar here is full 12 months of the year in a way that no amount of money can replicate in a city. For under $80,000, in a UNESCO-adjacent beautiful planned town on a stunning lake with year-round outdoor access and a functioning mill providing at least some employment base, the catch is the isolation, the language, and the fact that the nearest Costco is approximately 3 hours away, which will reorganize your relationship with bulk shopping forever. The next town makes Témiscaming look like downtown Montreal.
Number 4. HEARST, Ontario. HEARST, Ontario has 5,000 people, more moose per capita than almost anywhere in Canada, and a level of geographic removal that approaches the philosophical. It is 1,200 kilometers north of Toronto. There is no fast way to get there. The highway in, Highway 11, runs through boreal forest for hundreds of kilometers in a way that will recalibrate your understanding of what remote means if you've spent your life in southern Ontario. And yet, HEARST is thriving, relatively. Not thriving like a tech hub, thriving like a community that has decided, collectively, that it exists on its own terms. And you're welcome to join in or drive back the way you came. It is the most francophone municipality in Ontario outside of the Ottawa area. Over 80% of residents speak French as their first language, which gives it a cultural coherence that insulates it somewhat from the homogenizing forces that have hollowed out more connected small towns. The forestry sector still hums here. The agriculture in the Hearst clay belt, a flat, fertile anomaly in the Canadian Shield, where actual farming happens at this latitude, adds an economic dimension that most Northern Ontario towns lack. There is work in Hearst. Not abundant work, but real, functional, tradesperson scale work. Home prices run from $50,000 for something requiring attention to $80,000 for something turnkey. For under $80K, you get full residential properties with multiple bedrooms, attached garages for the winters you will absolutely need them for, and lots large enough that your neighbors are not a conversation you have involuntarily every morning. The moose situation is not a joke. They come into town. They stand in driveways. They eat people's gardens with an aristocratic indifference that suggests they have read the municipal bylaws and found them amusing. The black bear situation is similar but less stately. Wildlife in Hearst is not a wildlife watching activity. It's just the ambient condition of existing in Hearst.
Number 3. Dryden, Ontario. Dryden smells like paper. Not always, not overwhelmingly, but on certain wind days, particularly in the morning, the Resolute Forest Products Mill sends a sulfurous reminder across town that this place was built by and for industrial purpose, and it's still at that. The smell is not romantic. It is not the smell of artisanal coffee or fresh bread. It is the smell of employment, which is its own kind of perfume, depending on your circumstances. Dryden sits on Highway 17 in northwestern Ontario, population around 7,500 feet, roughly 4 hours west of Thunder Bay and 4 hours east of Winnipeg, in the dead center of one of the most scenically overwhelming sections of the Trans-Canada Highway. Wabigoon Lake is essentially in the backyard of half the town. Actual lake access, actual boating, actual sunsets that look like someone oversaturated the photo in editing, except it's real. The housing market in Dryden regularly produces 3- and 4-bedroom homes with double garages on good-sized lots for $65,000 to $79,000. The town has a hospital, a real 24-hour hospital, which is not something you can assume in any town on this list and should not be taken for granted. There's a college campus, a recreation center, and a downtown that, while not exactly booming, is at least inhabited, which is more than some entries on this list can claim. The Wabigoon River system, it should be noted with honesty, carries a legacy of mercury contamination from a chlor-alkali plant that operated through the 1970s, a contamination that devastated the Grassy Narrows First Nation downstream and remains an ongoing environmental injustice issue of significant importance. This history is part of the regional context and deserves acknowledgement rather than the glossy brochure omission it sometimes receives. The winters are genuinely severe. Northwestern Ontario cold is a specific wet cold that combines lake effect moisture with shield temperatures to produce a cold that is both technically extreme and personally insulting. But the fishing. Lake of the Woods is an hour west. The walleye are real. The sunsets are real. The house that costs less than most people's car payment is real. Let's cross into one of the genuinely unexpected success stories in this entire list. A town that made a bet on a specific demographic and somehow pulled it off. Number 2. ELLIOT Lake, Ontario. In 1990, Rio Algom and Denison Mines closed their uranium operations in ELLIOT Lake, Ontario. Between the 1950s and the closures, this town in the middle of the northern Ontario wilderness had been the uranium capital of the world, at its peak home to 25,000 people who were mining the metal that was simultaneously powering cities and threatening to end civilization. When the mines closed, the population fell off a cliff, down to about 10,000 within a few years, properties abandoned, a whole geography of economic catastrophe visible from the street. And then someone had an idea. A genuinely weird, specific, counterintuitive idea.
What if Elliott Lake marketed itself as a retirement destination? What if the very things that made the post-mine town problematic for young workers, the isolation, the quiet, the deeply established hospital and services that had been built to support a large population, were exactly what older Canadians with fixed incomes were looking for? It worked. Not perfectly, not without ongoing struggles, but it worked in a measurable demographic real estate market way. Elliott Lake today has one of the highest proportions of seniors per capita of any municipality in Ontario. The population has stabilized around 10,500. The hospital is well-funded, the recreation programs are extensive. The arts community has developed with the kind of committed energy that retired people with time and skills tend to produce. Average home prices? $60,000 to $78,000. You can find a 2-bedroom bungalow, updated kitchen, decent finishes on a quiet street near services for under $70,000. The value proposition is legitimately bizarre in the context of the national market. Elliott Lake sits on the north shore of Lake Huron country, and the natural environment, the lakes, the Canadian Shield rock, the birch and pine, is gorgeous in the particular mineral-smelling way of the Northern Ontario Shield. Mississauga Provincial Park is nearby. The lake access for fishing and paddling is extensive. The retail infrastructure is thin. A small downtown, a few grocery options, the usual Tim Hortons and Canadian Tire situation. And it's 2 hours from Sudbury, which is the nearest city with the kind of services and diversity a larger urban population takes for granted. But if you're a retiree, or someone with remote work and a high tolerance for quiet, Elliott Lake offers something remarkable: an established, functional community with genuine infrastructure that has been specifically and intentionally organized around the business of people living well on modest incomes. For under $80,000. But number one doesn't fit in any category. Number one is geologically, historically, jurisdictionally, and architecturally unlike anything else on this list or possibly in this country.
Number 1. FLIN FLON, Manitoba/Saskatchewan. FLIN FLON has 2 postal codes. One starts with R, Manitoba. One starts with S, Saskatchewan. The town exists in 2 provinces simultaneously, bisected by a provincial boundary that runs straight through residential streets, so that 2 houses that share a fence can be in different provinces with different property tax rates, different healthcare structures, and different regulatory environments. This is not a metaphor. This is the literal geography. The town is named after Josiah Flintabady Flonaton, a fictional character from a 1905 pulp novel called The Sunless City, in which a scientist travels through the center of the Earth via a golden submarine. A prospector named Tom Creighton found copper and gold here in 1915, was apparently reading the book at the time, thought the landscape matched the fictional landscape, named it accordingly, and the name stuck. That's the founding myth. A real town named after a fictional scientist in 2 provinces at once, built on top of a mine. The Hudson Bay Mining and Smelting Company, established here in 1927, is still operating. Zinc and copper mining continues, making Flin Flon one of the few towns on this list with an active resource extraction economy that isn't past tense. Population around 5,000 in the city proper, plus the surrounding communities. And while it has been declining, the decline is slower here than in comparable post-industrial towns because the mine hasn't completely left. A statue of Josiah Flintabady Flonaton, Flinty as locals call him, stands at the entrance to town. It was designed by Al Cap, the cartoonist who created Little Abner. The artistic lineage of the town's mascot runs through American newspaper comics from the 1960s. Flin Flon doesn't have a lore problem. Flin Flon has so much lore it should be subdivided and sold. The housing situation. Median home prices around $55,000 to $70,000. 4 residential properties, multiple bedrooms, actual yards, in a town with a functioning hospital, a college campus, an arena, and real honest-to-goodness Canadian Shield lake country surrounding it in every direction. Flin Flon sits on the Canadian Shield, pre-Cambrian rock, the oldest exposed geology in North America, and the landscape is extraordinary in the rugged, uncompromising way of the Shield everywhere. Lakes in every depression, rock faces rising from roadsides, spruce and birch growing in every crack. For under $70,000, you can own a house in a town with active industry, 2 provincial governments, a fictional founder, a cartoon mascot, some of the best lake country fishing in Canada, winters that will test
every assumption you have about yourself, and a community that has been surviving implausible circumstances since 1915. This is Canada. Not the Canada of the tourism commercials, not the Canada of the $800,000 condos, not the Instagram Canada of Banff and Whistler. This is the Canada that actually exists, in the 90% of the country where 10% of the country live, where houses cost less than a car and the mosquitoes have organized. 10 towns, 10 houses under $80,000. One enormous undertold country. Look, these aren't easy places. They're isolated, cold, economically complicated, and occasionally smell like sulfur or paper or both. But they are real communities where real people have built real lives. And in an era when an entire generation has been told homeownership is simply no longer accessible, they represent something important: the possibility of owning the floor under your feet. The question isn't whether you could handle FLIN, FLON, or ELLIOT Lake. The question is what you're actually trading away by staying somewhere you can't afford. Drop your pick in the comments. Which town would you actually try? Smash that like button, subscribe if you want the next list, because I've got 10 American towns under $50,000 that will make this list look like Beverly Hills. You are not ready.